quick note on how to use this tutorial. I recommend, on the first time of viewing this tutorial, that you watch it straight from start to finish without stopping. Once you've done that, you can then watch it a second time, click and pause as and when you feel confident to try and replicate some of the infographics for yourself. I also highly recommend that you visit this website where there's a huge amount of information on infographics, going into more depth on how to use them, when to use them and why to use them, and also gives you advice on how to use templates for beginners and perhaps people using them in their first year of a university degree. Welcome to a tutorial on infographics. So to begin with, what are infographics? Well, all degree projects, whether it be something like finding a gap in the market for a third year project to shop reporting, will all require you to conduct extensive amounts of research. This research will be in the form of both primary and secondary research, using both quantitative and qualitative methods. The result of all this research will be you gaining lots of different bits of data and information that you want to present as visually and easily as possible to your viewer. This is especially useful when you're restricted to word counts limits such as 1,500 words, and one of the best ways to display this information easily and with limited word counts is using something called infographics. So where does the term infographics come from? Well, quite simply and almost obviously, it's a combination of the word information and graphic to come as the result of infographics. You may have already heard of the term before. Infographics have become increasingly popular over the past 10 years, and you see them brightening up lots of things like blog content, web content, and especially in lots of marketing reports and presentations these days. Essentially, infographics make bulk pieces of information, for example, questionnaire results and marketing research from lots of your projects, more easy for a viewer to understand and digest. They make dry information more engaging and exciting for a reader as well. As an example, take this article written by aytm.com in 2016, analysing their sustainable fashion survey. When you read the whole report as a whole, it takes a good few minutes to read through it, and then you can't retain the information. You have to reread it to find the individual statistics that they're presenting in the report. However, when we just look at one section on the shopping habits, and then transfer that into a simple infographic like this, it becomes much more easy to digest. Instead, going through the article and pulling out the actual questions that are being asked here, and then displaying the results and statistics in simple charts and graphic vehicles makes it much more easier and exciting for the viewer to digest. Another thing you can do is highlight some of the key statistics that you've found within your research. For example here, the bold, 56% of all clothing buyers said they normally make their purchases in store. If this is really, really key, make it big, make it bold, and it will instantly draw the eye in of the viewer. So why should you be using infographics? Well, infographics is a key trend in presenting information at the moment, and as degree students, you should be exploiting this within all your projects. Remember, it's easy for people to remember imagery rather than text, hence the reason infographics are a really important vehicle to help people absorb information and, more importantly, remember it. When you first start researching infographics, some of the designs can appear a little intimidating, especially the ones made by graphic designers. However, you don't need a huge amount of design experience to create them. There are even template sites to help you with these too. All your degree projects should be branded as if you are a real-life buyer or merchandiser for the retail sector or retailer you've chosen to investigate. Therefore, it's a great idea to experiment with developing infographics from scratch so they can represent your branding direction of that particular retailer. For example, if you're doing a shop report for John Lewis, use the greens and whites and greys that they use within their website. It will help to make your project look really professional doing this. So let's take a look at how we actually create infographics. Here is the infographic I created from that first paragraph within the article I used as an example. It's worth mentioning that I'm creating this in Illustrator. However, if you're more comfortable using InDesign, it's exactly the same tools and methods used, so just create the same thing in there. It makes no difference. It's a good idea when you're creating infographics to not use a really extensive colour palette, maybe just one or two colours. You can see here I'm just using a selection of blue tones, mainly a light blue tone and a dark blue tone, then a lighter sort of grey blue in the background, and then black for my text. So although there's 4 colours there, you can see that the sort of predominant ones are just two shades of the blue. Same goes with the fonts. You don't want millions of fonts. I've just chosen 2 fonts, a more simple one, which is Quicksand, which I'm using for just the main body text, and then a bolder font which is called Lemon Milk, which is a more bolder font for anything that I want to stand up. Both these fonts I've downloaded from the font website DaFont. You can see Lemon Milk, which I downloaded earlier. To download a font, you literally just click on download, go to your downloads files, find the actual font, and then you'll find the fonts that either ending in .otf or .ttf. When you double click on them, it comes up with an install button. Just click install. Then you'll find that it eventually just installs and you can just search for it like any other font. Okay, so I'm going to look at the next paragraph from the report that I was looking at. And this one talks about sustainable fashion. So first of all, I'm just going to copy and paste my text here and update it to those words. And then looking at the next paragraph, is talking about obviously sustainable fashion. So I don't want to go and use too many different techniques here, but I want to use something different to what I've already used. So I've gone to Pinterest, where I've got a board on my Pinterest boards all about infographics. Now there's some there here that are really crazy and really intense, which I wouldn't recommend you doing, but they can be like good sources of inspiration. And I think at the moment I'm going to have a look at this one, and I quite like the way this graph just here is displayed. So I'm going to try and recreate something that looks similar to this to display the information for the next part. So going back to it, I know that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of information here. So I'm just going to start by creating 5 simple lines. To do this, I'm just going to use my straight line tool, and this time I think I'm going to do them vertically. Now, as I said, I want to keep to the same colour palette, so I'm going to use this grey as the background, which I've saved over here. Obviously the line's not very thick at the moment, so I'm just going to increase the thickness of it. So if I zoom in now, you can see there, you can see it a bit more clearer. So again, by making and increasing and decreasing the thickness. And I'm also going to just create sort of softer ends. So at the moment you can see the end of my line is just flat. If you click on this one, it just gives it like a rounded end. So if we go back to my example, you can see the lines have all got the background line, then a second line on top, which represents the percentage, which I'm going to do over here. So I'm just going to copy this line, which is Command and C, and then paste it directly on top. And to paste something directly on top is Command and then F. I'm going to now change the colour of my line over here to a darker blue. That one there. And this time I'm going to have like the hard edges. So then I've got 2 lines on top of each other, and if I just pull one out of the way, you can see that they're both just laying on top of each other. If I go and get my other mouse selection tool and hold on it over here and get the direct selection tool, if I click off my line, then back on the line, it's really important that you get exactly on the centre. You can see a white dot appears at the end, and if I hold shift and pull that dot down, you can see I'm decreasing the length of the line, so I've got one on top of the other. Just going to do that again. So make sure you click off using the direct selection tool, which is the white arrowhead, clicking right in the middle. Obviously you can see if I try and click anywhere else apart from the middle, it just doesn't select it. So in the middle, making sure both the dots at each end are white, select one of them, hold down shift, which just makes sure that it doesn't go off in different directions. Holding down shift, just pull it down. Now obviously I want to go back, and obviously a full line will represent 100%. Obviously I've got 61%, 50%, 46%. So it'll be up to you to sort of work out what kind of the length of the second line is. Okay, so the next thing I've done is I'm going to create the text for each one. So I know that the first one is 61% of clothing buyers since they said they consider themselves to be at least somewhat environmentally conscious. So I've got environmentally conscious written. And I think I'm going to just turn it up so that it's vertical and underneath. And actually I might just give it a slight slope. So I'm just going to hold down shift to go to the corner. You can see a little arrow as I poke towards the corner comes up. Just going to take it round slightly, just to give it like a bit of an edge. Okay, so I'm going to group those together, which is Command G. And now you can see using the other selection tool, so I'm using the one that selects the whole group, so the black filled in arrow, I can copy and paste a number of these. copy and pasting again. Then as I said, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 figures that I need to get in, so I'm going to do it about that far apart. Now obviously they're all in a different order, so if I select them all, so just drawing what's like I call an imaginary box over them all, you can go to your align objects. If that window's not open, you can find it by going to window at the very top and then align here. So window at the top, then align, and then you should get this palette that comes up. So make sure they're all selected. And you can see if it does different things here. You can easily, if you click on the wrong one, you can just press Command Z and it'll go back. So I want to align the top edges, so vertical align top. Again, don't worry if you make a mistake, you can easily just Command Z. And then making sure they're distributed evenly by the left edges. And now I'm just going to quickly update all the text. Okay, so whenever you've done a piece like that, especially when you're working with text that's quite small, it's always good to do a spell check. So Command and I, click Start. The next thing we want to start thinking about is percentages. So what I'm going to go up is zoom right in. It's always good to zoom into your work too. I select one of these. I'm just going to use the ruler. If you don't have a ruler up, you can go to View, Guides. Make sure you've got the guides visible, ruler, and then where mine says hide ruler, obviously that gets rid of it. Show rulers, bring them back, and you can pull a guide down so you know where the beginning and the end of a line is. If you click on one of the lines, you can also see where halfway is, so about here. So that kind of, I mean, I'm not doing this like really accurately, I just want to kind of illustrate the different amounts. So overall the first one I've got is 61%, so I know that line there is representing 50. So again, I need to go back and make sure I've got the direct selection tool. So I know that here's about 50, so I'm going to say 60 must be probably about there. The next statistic that I've got is 50, so perfect, that can go straight onto the line. Then I've got a 40, which is down about here, say. Then I've got a 46, so probably about there. And then my final one was 53, so actually that's probably worked out in the right place. I can also delete these lines afterwards. So that kind of illustrates that piece of information. So literally I've summed up all of this paragraph here into this small graph. Now, if you want to make things a bit more kind of easy or notable, you can add some statistics like I've done here. So maybe I just want to go and pop those in on top. So again, if I wanted to, I could go and place maybe 61% here if I fancy. And then carrying on for the rest of them. Maybe I'll make it a dark blue. Okay, so if I zoom back in at the end, you can see I've just done it by kind of eye. So it's just making sure that everything is nicely aligned, because that's the sort of thing where these bits start to look scruffy. So you just zoom straight in and make sure that everything's aligned so it looks nice and neat. So I've just added my percentages there too. Finally, I just want to add what question I'm actually answering here. So we've got how important is sustainability in your purchasing decisions, and I'm just going to move the graph over a little bit to place it where I want. And that's basically summed up all of that paragraph just there in one small infographic. Now, of course, that might have seemed like it took a little bit of time, but it might be that you don't need to use a different graph for each question. It might be that you come up with 5 different ideas. So maybe you're going to carry on using this bar graph, maybe trying to allow yourself to do a couple of icons, and then maybe kind of a couple of key quotes like this within it. So, you know, it could be that a question later on you copy and paste this, fill in the new questions and just adjust the bar graph accordingly. And again, you can use the same form of infographics in the future. So once you've used a few of these templates and created them yourselves, you can use them over again and again in the future. So the other thing that's worth mentioning is that this previous bar chart that I created is done in exactly the same way. So again, you've got your question here. And again, I've just created single lines with a separate line on top. So these are all just lines. I'll have used the align tool as well. when I was creating them by selecting them all and just making sure that they're all just aligned correctly. And then again, these are just all individual straight lines that I've just lined up, again using the align tool. And then I've just marked on where 10%, 20% and 30% are and put text on top. So again, all just the same kind of techniques that you've just learned in this previous bar graph. It's just this one's just going horizontal and this one's just going vertical. So now you've learnt this bar chart technique, you can go online. For example, I'm going back to my infographics board and my Pinterest board and look at some of the examples that maybe you've found. Again, there's various different methods that you can use, but this would be the same kind of thing. So if you quite like something like this bar graph here, you can just reflect it and do something similar underneath. It's just basically just using different colours and doing lines with arrowheads. There's also some nice ones over here where it's basically just adding a coloured background, which again you should just create a square with a colour and just send that to the back. You can use your CAD tutors to help you. So if you start a graph off and need some help to maybe put a coloured background on or experiment by doing something new, bring them to your CAD tutorials and get some advice on them. Okay, so looking at the next paragraph of the report that we were analysing in the sustainable fashion part of the article, it talks about how important is it that clothing you are buying is environmentally friendly. Well, if we look at all the statistics here, they add up to 100% because it's basically just analysing the pool of people that they did in their questionnaire and the results in terms of their opinions on environmentally friendly fashion. So for this one, I'm thinking about maybe using a pie chart. So it's worth noting here that there's a pie chart tool in Illustrator. So this part you can't actually do in InDesign, but what you can do is go to Illustrator, create the pie chart like we're going to here, and then copy and paste it into InDesign at the end, which I'll show you how to do. Okay, so if you look at your tool palette over here, you see you've got various different tools. You'll see one with a graph here. It might not show up as the pie chart icon, it might come up as the column graph. But you just scroll down to find the chart that you want to create. So in this instance, I want to use the pie graph tool. You'll see that it comes up with a little cross like this. Hold down Shift and then just draw out here where you want the pie chart to be. We can increase the size and things later. You'll then get this window that pops up here. So basically I want to just plot in all these stats here. So I know the first one is 5%, so I pop in simply a 5 here. The second one is 14, 24, 27. So I've got all my 5 stats in here, just going on the percentages that are written down here. If I need to go back and edit one, so for example the 14%, you just click onto the box and then you can edit the number. Once you're happy, click the tick and then magically you've got a pie chart formed. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is make your graph look in the same colours and format as the rest of your infographic. So you can move it around using your selection tool, which is the dark coloured mouse icon. You can just move it around. Then if you want to change the individual segments, the colours, you'll need to go and get the selection tool, the group selection tool, which is the arrowhead with the plus. Just click and hold and find the one with the plus. Make sure that the graph is deselected, so just select the edge to be happy with that. Then select the individual segments, go to your colour palette and just simply change them. The one thing I'll note at the moment is that you can see it's got a black outline to all the segments. I don't like that, it's up to you if you want to keep it for yours. So all I'm going to do is make sure that they all disappear by selecting the whole graph, just like I did then, seeing that black outline and clicking the invisible line there. I can go back to make sure that I just change the fill colours, which is a question at the moment because there's too many colours for it to note one of them. Okay, so I've now got a different colour for each of the segments of my pie chart. Now, depending on how many sections of the pie chart you've got, it might be that you do need to introduce a separate colour in. If you don't want to do that, you might need to do something where you actually write the stats on here, so put in the 5% on, the 24% and so on. But I've got enough colours here and I don't think it detracts, even though I've got the black coming in too much from my original infographic. So all I'm going to do is create a key here. So to create that key, first of all, I'm going to write in bold the number the percentage is referring to from the report, and then the text that answers what that actual percentage is representing. And then I'm going to do that for all of them. So at the moment they're all a bit disorderly, so I'm going to select all of them and make sure they're aligned to the left there and then distributed vertically from the bottom. Make sure the top one is aligned where you want it with that percentage and the bottom one in the same. So actually I'll just align them to the bottom there. Select all the answers, make sure they're aligned by the left. Just move them out slightly so they're all starting the same place. You can see I've got an extra space there, which I'm just going to delete. And make sure that they're all happy and look correct. So the most important thing about infographics is making sure that the information is really easy to digest for the viewer. At the moment, my pie chart still feels a bit blank, and also it's quite difficult to see the information here. So what I've begun to do is highlight the pieces of information that are key. So 5% only ever buy clothing and accessories that is considered to be environmentally friendly. People that buy it most of the time, half the time. Then here it's like they rarely ever buy. So I'm going to highlight that. Use my eyedropper tool. I've just increased it and made it bold. So increase the size of the font. So here you can see it just puts it in a little bit more context. And then finally, no opinion. Ooh, onto that one. So then just to make my graph a bit more clearer, I'm going to copy those and put them on here. So I know that that's 19%. Okay, so there I have all my text on there. I'm just going to relay it out. Okay, so I've added that. You may feel that you maybe don't even need these anymore. I've added the percentages at the end, or you might feel that you prefer to have the percentages there and maybe not there. Again, that's up to you to make the decision over. Okay, so finally, we've created this in Illustrator because that's where the pie chart tool is. However, if you're more comfortable using InDesign, you just want to copy and paste this into it. So it's worth mentioning that obviously anything that was text you could have just done directly into InDesign. So you could have just copied and pasted the original pie chart. So just going to copy, I'm using the shortcut of Command and C. Some people prefer doing edit and copy. And then you can just Command V or edit and paste directly in. Then you could have done all your text work directly in here. Or alternatively, going back to Illustrator, selecting the whole lot, copying, and then pasting it directly into your InDesign report, whichever way you're comfortable with. So to draw a conclusion to the sustainable part of the fashion article that we're reading, there's a final sentence that says Walmart was named as consumers' favourite source for eco-friendly options, followed by Target, Levi's, Macy's and thrift stores. Now I think this is really interesting, but it's almost completely lost when it's just written in that format of the article. So how can I display this information? Obviously a chart like this might not work, nor would maybe my bar chart, or like the kind of infographic vehicles like this. So the best way of displaying these results I've found is just by using text. So I've started off by doing the biggest text at 60, then naturally the next one at 48, the third one for Macy's, I've done at 36, 24 for Levi's, and then finally 21 for thrift stores. So you might want to sort of relay things out. I've literally just done this by eye. I haven't really done an align tool because it wouldn't really work. But again, I'm just going to use the colours within my palette and gently letting them go kind of lighter as we get further on. So obviously Walmart at the very top stays the most bold, and carrying on a grey for that one. So who are consumers' favourite for eco-friendly options? 1 Walmart, 2 Target, 3 Macy's, 4 Levi's and thrift store. And I think that stands out quite nicely. And that concludes that second part on sustainable fashion. So the final part of the article is about ethical brands, going on the same sort of format as before. So they've obviously interviewed people and then got their statistics back. So with this one, I've decided to use something called a bubble graph, and I've actually already laid it out. So just representing all the statistics. So how often do you buy ethically purchased items or clothing or accessories? So 5%, 13% most of the time. So just to quickly show you, I'm just going to mimic this underneath. I've got my circle tool again, like you've done before, or the ellipse tool. Draw my circle, filled it in with a colour. So for the 5% one, this time I'm using my secondary font, which was lemon milk. So changing it to lemon milk. Just literally writing 5%. Zooming in a bit. It's always good to zoom right into your work. It makes it much more easier. Changing it to white. And then with that one, I've just written the text on top, always. So that's in the incorrect font now, so it's going back to the Quicksand one. I'll just select it there. And then just lining it up. So to make sure it's all centrally aligned, I can go like that using the Align one centrally aligned on my tools palette. Then for the next one, just repeating the same thing. So creating a circle. This time I'm going for a slightly lighter colour. Now I'm using my lemon milk again, so I can copy and paste that. This time it's 13%. Can't see it there, but obviously once I bring it in front here. And then I'll just click the text from here because it's just obviously exactly the same. And then again, you can just align it, centrally align it, and then carry on with them all and just lay it out neatly. So I'll delete those now, but just another way of doing what we'd call a bubble graph in infographics. So what's interesting about this Ethical Brands article is that it goes on to say, of those who purchased from ethical brands at least half the time, the vast majority also said they purchased eco-friendly clothing items at least half the time. Those shoppers were also more likely to have shopped within the past day, week and month over other consumers. So we can just pull that aside because that's quite interesting. It probably says that, you know, half the people that are purchasing are, you know, looking at sustainable fashion as a whole, so purchasing ethical, from ethical brands, eco-friendly brands and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to create a straight line. I'm actually going to make this a dashed line. You can increase the size of the dashes and things here. And then I'm going to pull out another bubble and then just write that stat within there. So I've written that stat in there. I've literally just played with text. So with a couple of the lines, all I've done is put it into uppercase. You can do that easily by just selecting the text, going to type, change case uppercase. I want to keep that as lowercase, so I'll just change it back. And then just changing the colour of a couple of bits and increasing the height. So a couple of bits at 13 and a couple of bits at 8. And then finally, it says those shoppers were also more likely to have shopped within the past day, week, month than other consumers. So all I'm going to do for that is actually create a circle over that one. I'm going to get my text tool, and you can do text on half tool. I've already got the text copied. So I can go back and copy it from here, the original article, and then into here. Quicksand, I'm just going to take it back down to book rather than bold, and then decrease it and just place it around the edge there. Again, you can just make sure that it's all aligned, and it just makes it a bit more interesting. And you could then just switch the text around so that it meets the arrowhead there, just to make it a bit more interesting as well. So that's using that bubble graph at the same time. Now the last thing it goes on to say, again, Walmart was the top store name for consumers to find ethically made clothing products, followed by so on and so forth. So I think what I'll do is just copy and paste this graph to keep that in the same kind of context and display, and just edit it with that new information there. So finally you can see here that final question, who are consumers' favourite source for ethical brands? Walmart, Target, Trader Joe's, Nike, Macy's, Levi's and Amazon. The final type of infographic I'm going to show you in this tutorial is one like this, which is what we call a vector graphic infographic. So it was a simple question going back to the shopping habits of all the consumers where they're analysing their purchase decisions. So the question was, where do people purchase their clothing from? So we had 56% in store, 32% on the computer, then catalogues, and then on iPhones. So it was an easy one to create an illustrative vector infographic with. So I'm assuming at this stage that you're able to create your own text. So all I've done is create these little vector images, then put text inside using a normal text box like we've done for everything else within the infographic. Okay, so 4%, let's start with the telephone, the iPhone. So you can just go to your browser and then you can click or search for iPhone silhouette. It's really, really important that it's just a black and white image. And the clearer the better. Make sure it's not too pixelated. So again, I'm just going to repeat that. It's really important that it's just a black and white image to be able to do a trace. If there's all sorts of colours, or if it's something more like one of these, it'll be impossible to do. So something like this is perfect. So save the image or drag and drop it to your desktop, which is whatever method you prefer. Then make sure you place it onto your Illustrator page. Again, it's very important to mention that you can't do this in InDesign. It has to be in Illustrator. But again, once you've traced it, you can copy and paste it into InDesign, which I'll show you in a second. So once your image is in here, there'll be a blue cross. Click Embed, which will automatically be on that top screen, so here, and you'll see that blue cross goes. You'll then see the image trace option. There's a little arrow right beside it that you can see it highlights as I hover over it. Click on it and go down to click Silhouette. So that's finding the arrow next to image trace, scrolling down to Silhouette and select it. You can see it slightly crisps up. You might be able to see it or you might not, depending on the quality of your image. You then need to click Expand. And you can see here that it's now what we call a vector and can be edited. So I can change the colour of it. Keep it as this dark blue. I know that it was 4%, so I'm using my lemon milk font, writing 4%, making sure it's the same colour. And I'm literally just expanding that, making it bigger and placing it inside. So let's repeat that with the computer one. So again, here's one I found earlier. So I've searched for a computer silhouette. Again, it has to be a black and white image, just a silhouette. Saving it to your desktop or wherever you like to save your images. Making it bigger. This one might be a bit more difficult because there's a few bits on top of it, but we can always go and search for another one. Generally, there's loads of silhouettes once you start searching. So embed first of all. The little arrow beside image trace, selecting silhouette. Again, it's really important here that we click silhouette. If you select one of the other ones, it'll be really, really difficult for you to edit. So making sure you click silhouette, then expand, and again, choosing the color. And I know that this one is 32%, so the same thing, writing my 32%, making it as large as I like to fit inside. And there I have it. Two different silhouettes. So again, like I said, you can just copy and paste these. You could just copy the original silhouette and paste it into InDesign, and then in InDesign do a text box and then write your 4% if you prefer that. Whichever way you prefer working. And then I know that obviously it's a lemon milk font. I can outline the font to make it easier. So whichever method you work with, and then you could create the infographic straight into InDesign, but obviously using the Illustrator for the tracing option. And there you have it. That's how you make one of these graphic style infographics. So not that hard at all, but they're really, really effective at the same time. Okay, so I've got all my infographic information here. The last thing I want to do is add a conclusion. So obviously I'm taking this from somebody else's report. You'll be able to draw your own conclusion. So they've got their key takeaways. Now there's no need for me to really display this in an infographic form. Obviously I've summarised all this information before into this single infographic, so it should be a lot more easier and pleasant to read. And again, if I was doing it as a presentation, it's a lot more interesting for you guys to have a look at this rather than just having this screen and me talking through the whole lot. But obviously with everything, and you'll see that when you get feedback back, quite often we're asking you to analyse and conclude more. So at the end of the infographic, you could just do a small box that kind of concludes here. Or again, if it was a presentation, you just have something that you draw a conclusion vocally from. So I've got all my infographics here. I just want to tighten it up a bit just so that it all looks same and there's enough space here at the end. So I'm just going to play around with that. And there you have it, the finished infographic. Don't forget to spell check though at the very end.